Hey everyone, I'm Andrea, your real life English fluency coach, and in today's fun lesson, you'll be learning lots of weird and interesting facts about British culture and life in general. And you'll also improve your listening skills. Now, for today's lesson, this is based on my own experience of growing up and living in the UK. However, I also gathered some facts from my friends and family, which was really fun to do as well. Now, before we get into the lesson, in case you're new here, I want to let you know that we are here to guide you beyond the classroom, to live and learn and speak English in the real world. So be sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell down below so that you don't miss a single one of our new lessons. Okay, so we're starting off with an interesting fact, which most of you probably know, but in the UK, we love tea. It is a huge part of our culture, and people drink multiple cups of tea a day, rather than coffee, in fact. So it's usually the drink of choice of many people. And it wasn't until I moved to Spain that I actually started drinking more coffee, whereas in the UK, I tended to drink a lot more tea. The next fact is that we never push into a queue. So in America, they would call this a line, I think, but we would say a queue when you have to line up at the supermarket to wait to pay for your things, or when you go to get some paperwork sorted and there's a queue there and you have to wait in line. So we do not like it when people jump the queue, as we would say. It's impolite. So if you didn't know, another interesting fact about the UK is that we are very big on manners, meaning that manners and being polite is very important. So if you jump the queue, you're not considering other people and you're just thinking about yourself. So this was something that I struggled with when I first moved to Spain, because the culture here in terms of lining up in a queue is quite different. It doesn't really happen. And I was so frustrated and concerned that people were just jumping in front of me when they could see that I was there waiting before them. And that's something that I found quite different when I moved here as well. But in the UK, this does not happen. So it's important to be mindful of that. Also in the UK, we love to talk about the weather, and I sometimes find myself starting conversations this way as well. I think we tend to do it because the weather in the UK is so unpredictable, and this leads to people talking about it a lot. Not only this, but it's also never quite right for us. So in the summer, when it actually gets too hot, we complain about it. And then in the winter, when it's too cold, we complain about this as well. But really, I suppose we shouldn't be complaining at all because, you know, it's so interchangeable and we should just be used to it by now, but it's something that is part of our culture. So because the weather is so unpredictable in the UK, we actually tend not to travel that much around the UK, because if you have a 2-week summer holiday, you might go somewhere in the UK and it be raining, and you want the opportunity to be in the sunshine, maybe visit the beach. And so what most people do is they have a lovely 2-week summer holiday where they'll go somewhere warm usually. This is very typical, and people really look forward to their summer holiday. It's like the highlight of their year, and often people also actually go shopping and buy lots of summer clothes only to wear during these 2 weeks, because if you know the UK, we don't really tend to have a proper summer. We might be lucky to get 2 weeks of a summer kind of weather. A really useful one to know is that if you are on the tube, which is what we call the underground, then if you're going to stand on it, you need to stand on the right-hand side. This is because on the left-hand side, people tend to walk up them. So those people that are in a bit of a hurry, they're in a bit of a rush, maybe getting to work or an appointment, they like to be able to walk up the escalator. But if you're standing on the left side, you might actually get someone complaining behind you or asking you to start walking up, because this is basically the rule and what people do on escalators in general, but particularly on the tube. Another interesting one is that in the UK, when we see a friend or we greet someone, we tend not to kiss. We usually give a hug. So this is something that I kind of used to get confused with quite a lot growing up, because my family is Greek Cypriot and we kiss on both cheeks. So sometimes I would see a friend and I'd go in for a kiss and then go in for a hug, and it would kind of be a bit awkward and we'd do like a kiss and a hug. But generally in the UK, we only hug when we greet a friend or family member. Another one, when visiting someone's house, you should call beforehand. So it's impolite or rude to just turn up to someone's house unexpectedly. We would kind of see this as impolite, and so the protocol is to call them up beforehand just to see if it's a good time to pop over. In case you didn't know, in the UK we are very big on manners, meaning they are important to us. So we are extremely polite and we use the words sorry, please and thank you very much. Sometimes we actually overuse them. For example, if you're walking down the street and someone bumps into you, you'll probably actually apologize to that person even though it wasn't your fault. And people tend not to just say, oh, sorry, or excuse me. They'll be like, oh, sorry, I'm so sorry. You know, to really show that they are apologetic and they mean what they are saying. This was one that came up a lot when I asked my friends and family, and it is just a really funny one as well about people in general in the UK because it's so true. And if you would like to learn more phrases that you can use in daily conversation, I made this lesson where you can learn more than 55 phrases. And so if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you watch it. You can click up here or down in the description box below to watch that lesson next. So the next one is that people still have carpets in their house. This is quite traditional for people to have them still in their bedrooms upstairs. I would say that most people generally now don't have them in the downstairs of their house, but you will definitely see them on the stairs. And I think that's quite practical because it tends to make less noise when you're going up and down the stairs. And some people do also still have them in their bedrooms. And I think this is quite a weird one because in many other countries around the world, they tend not to have carpets as much. So it will be interesting to know if people have carpets in their homes in your country. So let me know in the comments down below. So talking about the weather again, when it's sunny but not very hot, people use it as an excuse to go out in a t-shirt, sometimes in shorts and even flip-flops. So I'm talking about maybe 15, 16, 17 degree weather, but sunshine. So it's actually still quite chilly. You might even need to wear a jacket or a coat. But people like to enjoy the sunshine, so they'll actually go out in a t-shirt, and you'll see this a lot in the UK. Also, people tend to burn a lot because they don't realize how strong the sun is, so they'll go out without wearing sunscreen, which can be quite dangerous as well. So you'll often see lots of red bodies or red faces where people have become burnt. Now in the UK, when you're invited to someone's house for dinner, it's polite to take something along with you, a small gift, which could be a bottle of wine or some chocolates or maybe a dessert. And sometimes you would ask the person, shall we bring anything? Would you like us to bring anything? And often again, to be polite, people say, no, you don't need to bring anything. But it is good manners to take something along with you. And if you would like to learn more about parties and celebrations and vocabulary related to these things, then I highly recommend you check out this lesson by clicking up here or down in the description box below to watch it next. So talking about dinner parties, why not start talking about food? Because it is a big part of the culture as well. And traditionally on Sundays, families would come together to have a Sunday roast, so a roast dinner. And this would typically be maybe a roast chicken, roast beef, roast lamb, it could be any type of meat. And you'd have it with Yorkshire puddings, roast potatoes, vegetables and gravy. And most people would make this at home, but lots of people also go to the pub for a pub lunch. And so they usually on a Sunday typically have a roast dinner or a roast pub lunch. So unlike Spain, in the UK, dinner is actually the biggest meal of the day. And so at lunchtime, we tend to have something small, maybe a sandwich or a salad. And then around 6 or 7 p.m. in the evening, we will have our dinner. So again, in comparison to many European countries, from my experience that I know of, here in Spain and also in Greece, we tend to have dinner a lot earlier than other countries. We usually tend to have lunch or have a lunch break around 12 noon, the middle of the day, or 1 o'clock, really, the latest. And then as soon as we get home, we tend to start preparing the dinner. So most people that don't have to work too late will eat dinner around 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening. A little fact within this fact is that many people also call this time of day tea time. So it's not necessarily a time to sit and drink tea, but it just means their dinner. And this is very typical, especially in the north of England, where people would call their dinner tea. So they would say, it's time for tea. Come and sit down, it's tea time. And this actually means their dinner. Continuing on with the food theme, we actually also have some unusual food names. One in particular is Spotted Dick, which is this dessert. And this was a typical dessert for a school dinner, for example. So it's a sponge cake and you often eat it with custard. It's actually pretty good. It's just a really strange name and one that even makes natives laugh. And another one is Toad in the Hole, which is actually sausages within like a pastry. And I guess maybe it looks like a toad in a hole, and that's where the name comes from. But you're not actually eating toad, it is actually sausages. And you could have meat sausages or vegan sausages, whatever you fancy, but it's quite an unusual name. And also we have the word or the dish Yorkshire pudding. And I love Yorkshire puddings. It's one of my favorite things when having a roast dinner, and it's very typical of the UK, but it isn't actually a pudding. So it's not a dessert. You would have it with your roast dinner, for example. It's a savory dish and it's a pastry, and oh, it's so delicious, and I could eat one right away right now. So the last one on food right now is that fish and chips is quite known as one of our national dishes. To be honest, many people in other parts of Europe tend to think that the UK don't know what good food is, but you can find some really excellent food in the UK. Fish and chips is absolutely delicious, but it's not quite as popular these days. And so if people are having a takeaway, which is typical on a Friday or Saturday night, people would probably choose to have a Chinese takeaway or an Indian takeaway, or maybe order a pizza or something like that. And due to the diversity of the country, especially in London, you can choose any type of cuisine you want. You'll find everything. The food, especially in London, from my experience living there, is incredible. It's so diverse. You can find absolutely any type of cuisine that you want. Do you want to take your English language learning to the next level? Then I highly recommend our Real Life Native Immersion course. This 41-week course will take you on a real-life adventure of the English language, each week exploring a different topic connected to our goal, to help you understand and use real native English and make it a permanent part of your life in a way that is fun, natural and convenient. And did you know you can try it right now for free with our 3-part Power Learning series? All you have to do is click up here or down in the description box below to learn more and sign up now. We look forward to seeing you there. There is also quite a big drinking culture in the UK, so on a Friday and Saturday night you'll find lots of people in pubs and bars and clubs all around the cities, and they will most likely be drinking heavily. I think this situation is improving a little bit now, but the culture in general is quite known to be a big drinking culture. Another one that I really like is that when we're signing off a text message, we tend to do this with a lowercase x. So this represents a kiss. You may have heard XOXO, maybe from the TV series Gossip Girl, and this represents a kiss and a hug, a kiss and a hug. But in the UK, we tend to just have one lowercase x, and that represents a kiss, and this is how we sign off text messages. But I suppose maybe now with emojis being so popular, people tend to use emojis a lot more as well. And I think even if you'll type in an X or maybe 2 X's, the emoji pops up so you can actually select it as well. So the next one is all to do with public transport. Now, the public transport in the UK is really great. Like, you can really use buses and trains and the tube, and they are usually quite efficient and many people use them. However, it's expected to give up your seat on any of these types of public transport if you see someone that is elderly or maybe pregnant or maybe a family with children. So it's very polite to do this. It is kind of common sense as well, in a way, thinking about other people before putting yourself first. But if you don't do this, people will actually probably start giving you dirty looks. We would even say daggers. They're giving me daggers. That's an expression in the UK. A dagger is actually a knife. It's a type of knife. And it's kind of like they're looking at you with such a bad look. It's like they're throwing daggers at you. Because that's another thing in the UK, is that people are so polite, they sometimes don't want to start a confrontation. So rather than actually say something to you like, oh, you should be giving up your seat, they might just tut and give you a bit of a dirty look. So this is a really important one, especially if you're traveling in the UK, then you're aware of this cultural aspect. Also on public transport, we find it rude when people talk loudly on their phones. So again, it's being considerate of other people and the fact that you are sharing the space. I remember this was a bit of a shock for me as well when I first moved to Spain, because when I used to take the train into work, there would be lots of students getting on the train and they would be so loud, but really early in the morning at like 7 or 7:30 o'clock in the morning, and just not considering everyone else at all. And this is probably because of the way that I grew up and the British culture on public transport. So another very interesting one that's very different to the US is that we don't tip that much. It has become customary to tip maybe around 10% depending on the size of your bill, but generally if you're going out for a meal, 2 people, and it comes to about £50, you would not leave more than a £5 tip, whereas in the US they tend to tip at least 20% now. And if you are going to some nice or posh London restaurants, they would actually add a 12.5% tip to your bill, but this is discretionary, meaning that you don't have to pay this amount. It's like a suggested tip amount. So when paying the bill, you could ask them to remove that from your final bill, and most people do this and leave cash instead. I think it's also to make sure that the waiting staff in the restaurant are the ones that receive the tip as well. So many people tend to do this instead, but we don't tip that much. So in many countries around the world, people like to actually be quite fair, but in the UK, we like to be tanned. And because we don't get so much sun throughout the year, many people actually use fake tan. So I think now, because they can be quite dangerous, they're not very healthy or good for you, less people use tanning beds and people tend to use more fake tan at home. So what this kind of can sometimes lead to is people ending up looking a little bit orange, maybe a bit like a particular president that you might think of. This can often happen because people are obsessed with being tanned and they will use maybe too much fake tan and end up looking a little bit orange. Now, for quite a small country, the UK actually has a lot of different accents. It's so incredible that there are almost 40 different accents in the UK alone. Now, that's a lot for such a small country, and this is something that can also baffle and confuse many people, because when they're going from one city to another, even a short distance, there is a completely new and different accent. And this can be very difficult for people to understand, especially English language learners. But we made a great lesson over on our channel, Learn English with TV series, where you can learn 5 different but real British accents, not just the usual Cockney or received pronunciation that you usually see in TV series and movies. Another interesting fact is that our plugs are different in the UK. So usually in Europe there is a 2-pronged plug. However, in the UK we have a 3-pronged plug. So if you're traveling, you tend to have to take an adapter with you. The next fact is that in the UK, most children, or they become adults once they're 18, they tend to move out of home when they are 18. So if people go off to uni, this is usually the first step when they leave home. And mostly after their university, when they're around 21 or 22 years old, when they finish studying, they will then still go out and live on their own. However, due to the rising prices in rent and even buying a house is really difficult in the UK, this is changing a little bit, and many people are actually moving back in with their parents until they can save some money maybe and then move back out again. Speaking of universities, our university fees are very high. When I went to university, I think the first 2 years in fact were free, and then they changed the law, and in my final year the fees were about £1,000 a year, which again is a lot of money. However, now it's changed and it's even more. It's now £9,000 a year to go to university in the UK. So if you're doing a 3-year degree, that's £27,000. That is a lot of money, and something that was quite new to the UK, and people were very against it because it makes it even more difficult for people to actually further their education. Now, I know that in the US, it's even more expensive. I know that some universities in the US can actually cost $27,000 per year. So in that respect, it's still less, but it is pretty expensive. And that's for UK residents. So if you're coming from abroad, it might even actually cost more. So in the UK, we follow daylight savings, meaning that in the last weekend in October, the clocks go back 1 hour, and then at the end of March, the clocks go forward 1 hour. So actually, very recently, the clocks just went back. So in the UK, when this happens, it means that there is very little daylight during the day. So you'll often find that you're waking up and arriving to work just as the sun is rising. And then by the time you're leaving work to go home, the sun has already gone down, so it's still dark. So you could go to work and come home and never have seen the daylight, basically. So this can make it quite difficult during the winter months, because if you're not seeing that light, if you're not getting the sunshine, it can sometimes be quite depressing. But this is very typical in the UK and something that people do find quite difficult living with. Okay, so when driving, we tend not to use our car horns too much. This may go back again to us being quite polite and really manners being very important for us. And of course people use them, but usually only if it's a necessity. You know, if you need to warn someone or if there is a dangerous incident, people won't just want to use it. So for example, when I traveled to India, which was an amazing experience, I had a huge shock when on the roads, especially in Delhi, this is all you could hear. It was car horns, and people were just actually really using the horn to just say, oh, I'm going to cut in now, or I'm just behind you now, and it's really normal. But if you're not used to it, it can be quite a shock. Also, we do tend to be quite polite drivers, so if someone gives you way, meaning that they let you pass when maybe they don't need to, you would actually put your hand up like this or give a nod or something to say thank you. And if you don't do it, people might think you're actually quite a rude driver, and they may just like curse at you. Or sometimes you might see in your rearview mirror, you might look at the person and they're like, they didn't say thank you, because it's polite to do so. Another interesting fact, and maybe actually quite a weird one, is that our crossings, so our pedestrian crossings, when you're crossing the street, have different names. So we have a zebra crossing, a toucan crossing, and even a pelican crossing. So they are named after animals, and they all do actually look quite different. And the most common one is the zebra crossing, where it means that you can actually cross. So drivers have to stop, and it has those black and white lines, the thick grid kind of going across the road, which is why it's called a zebra crossing. So it does make sense. Another interesting fact is that for a 2-week period, we use the word fortnight. So I think in the US, this isn't very typical. You won't hear people say a fortnight, but we do. So we might say, let's meet again in a fortnight. So that means that you're going to have another meeting in 2 weeks' time. We might even say, oh, it's my birthday in a fortnight. And again, that means that in 2 weeks' time, it's your birthday. So another interesting fact about British people is that they tend not to show their emotions too much. And this is changing a little bit now with people talking more about mental health, which is really important and a great thing that's happening. But we tend to have more of a stiff upper lip. So this is a way of describing people. If you have a stiff upper lip, it means that you're not going to get emotional or upset, and that you're being strong in a moment where you might actually be quite upset. So it's not really showing your emotion. And sometimes it's good to be strong and to not show your emotions, but then it's also important sometimes if you need help or you want to talk about how you're feeling, then you should talk about this. So I think that's where this one is changing a little bit. But traditionally, people in the UK tend to have more of a stiff upper lip. So just to describe where that might actually come from, if you think about when someone cries, their face tends to quite show their emotion a lot. But if you have a stiff upper lip, it means that you are able to not show your emotions. So you're being strong in that your facial features aren't really changing so much. A really funny one is that when people go out, especially girls, they tend to go out just wearing their outfit without their coat, even in the freezing winter, even in the snow. I remember people doing this when I was at university, and I just couldn't because I really feel the cold. I guess it's the Mediterranean blood in me. But generally, people do not want to have to carry their coat once they enter a club or a bar. And they also don't want to queue up for the cloakroom, because that's often what would happen. There would be a huge queue to give in your coat, and then at the end of the night as well, if you wanted to get your coat back out from the cloakroom, you'd have to queue up. So to avoid this, girls would just go out wearing their outfit and be freezing, but just deal with it. So that's quite a weird one and quite a funny one as well. And finally, quite a weird one here as well, is that in the UK, if you have a TV, you must have a TV license. Now, this is because the BBC don't show any adverts on their channels. So they rely on people paying the TV license to actually create their programs and run everything. Whereas other channels in the UK run adverts, and so they make money this way. But even if you don't watch the BBC, even if you just buy a TV so that you can watch Netflix and Amazon Prime and any other streaming services, you have to pay your TV license. If you don't, you could get fined. And I remember when I was at university, inspectors would actually come to knock on your door to check if you have a TV and if you have a TV license, because it would be registered. And so if you didn't, you could have a really big fine to pay. And so that's quite an interesting one there. Even if you don't watch the BBC, you have to have a TV license if you own a TV. So there you have it. You've had very many weird and interesting facts there about British culture and life in general. I hope it gave you a bit more insight into the culture, and hopefully you learn a lot more things about it that you didn't know already. And maybe there are some in there that you did know and they've just been confirmed for you as well. So if you enjoyed today's lesson, please do give me a thumbs up down below so that I know you want more content like this. And now it's time to go beyond the classroom and live your English. Ah, yeah. And in today's lesson, you are going to be learning 55 common English phrases that you can start using in conversations to sound more natural when speaking. So these phrases that I will teach you today are ones that natives use a lot,